Welcome to the Newsome MMA podcast in association with MMA Play 365, giving you the edge in MMA betting. I'm your host as always, Newsome, with your co-host John, and tonight we're back once again to break down UFC 243 from Melbourne, Australia. John, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm very well, thank you, my friend. I'm very well. Seems like a long time since we last did one of these, and feels good to be back. I wish on paper we had a slightly better card to be talking about. I mean, pay-per-view terms, this is on paper, as I always say, because you never know what's going to happen come fight night. But it looks a bit of a weak card. It looks pretty one-dimensional, with just the main event being the real showstopper. But fingers crossed, we get a good card come fight night.
Yeah, I agree, and you know what? I think the co-main event's actually really good as well. But outside of those two fights, it's I do feel for the Australians a little bit. So
Definitely.
I really hope that a lot of these fighters, all of these fighters, just really show up, put on a good performance. Because let's be honest, you know, cards can be weak, and like you said, on paper, and the name values might not be there throughout the entire card. But man, if you're sitting in an arena and you've got 11, 12 absolutely electric fights, it doesn't matter what names are on the paper. You know, you're going to enjoy it, you're going to have a good time, and you're going to remember the card for sure. So, you know, hopefully it's a good card, but I tend to agree as well. From a pay-per-view perspective, outside of the top two fights, it is a little weak, as we've already said on paper. And just before we continue, we need to talk about MMA Play 365. Unfortunately, we are coming off a rough month in regards to the long-term gamblers, but the facts are that this is actually my first losing month since February at the start of 2019. That's 6 straight months of profit. The long-term record speaks for itself, and we're still having a fantastic year of MMA handicapping. As for the fun gamblers, we actually hit a nice parlay in Mexico City, which would have paid for an entire 12-month subscription based on the estimated payout stated in the MMA Play 365 hub. I'm really looking forward to getting back on track in October, and don't forget, we still have our crazy offers available. MMA Play 365 is one of the cheapest betting advice services on the internet, and you really get so much for your money with that service. It's only $198 for your first full year, or $30 per month, which can be cancelled for free at any time. So sign up today and start making money. But with that said, let's break down some fights at UFC 243, and the main event on the Newsome MMA main card is obviously the main event of the evening. We've got an unbelievable middleweight title fight here. We've got the current champion, Robert the Reaper Whittaker, against the interim middleweight champion, Israel the Last Stylebender Adesanya. And man, not only is this the fight that everybody's come to see, arguably the most anticipated title fight of 2019, but in my opinion, this is the best middleweight title fight in UFC history. John, I want to know, who have you got winning?
That's a big shout, man. The best middleweight title fight in history. But I can't be far off agreeing with you, man. I mean, I'm absolutely pumped about this fight. Like you said, it's one of those fights that just everyone and everywhere I see people are hyped for this fight. I mean, how can you not be? It's going to be an absolute war, I believe, between two guys that are capable of going to war, and neither of them take a back step as well. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to be in for some entertainment in this main event. I can't imagine in the slightest that this is going to be a letdown in any way, shape or form. It's such an intriguing fight to break down as well, and to try and look into, because they're two guys with very different styles, very different like body shapes, and just very different opponents that they've faced coming into this. I mean, it's just really interesting to see how it's going to go down, and I've really enjoyed this week as well, looking on social media and things like that, people's different perspective of how it's going to go down, and how they see it playing out, because I keep seeing loads of different things out there, and 1 minute I'll be seeing everyone backing the champion Robert Whittaker, next thing I'll see people backing the interim champion, and man, I just can't wait to see it go down. But as I said, both of these guys are coming into this fight off the back of absolute wars. Obviously, Robert Whittaker has had 2 back-to-back barn burners against Yoel Romero. Obviously, he took a lot of damage in those 2 fights, so that's something that maybe do we need to think about going into this fight. I know Israel Adesanya, of course, had that fight of the year contender fight against Callan Gastelum, where he won the belt earlier this year in April. Again, that was a war. He took a lot of damage. We saw him hurt more than we've seen him hurt in any fight so far in his UFC tenure, and it's just really interesting to break down, because especially the fact that Robert Whittaker, obviously we've seen him twice now against Yoel Romero. The last fight was in June of last year, and then we saw him fight against Yoel Romero in their first fight at UFC 213. That was in July of 2017. And then he fought Jacare Souza, who obviously we know is, although he's got a good striking, Jacare, he's predominantly a jiu-jitsu guy. We know Yoel's obviously got his strong wrestling, so he's coming in and facing a guy really with a completely different style to a guy that any guys that he's fought for a long, long time. I mean, because before the Jacare fight, we've got Derek Brunson, who, although he's got that one-punch knockout power, he's got that wrestling background as well. Then we've got Rafael Natal before that, and then you're really looking back at the Uriah Hall fight in 2015, and then obviously going back to when he was a welterweight against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson all the way back in February of 2014, to get anywhere that I think is slightly similar to the style that Israel Adesanya brings to the table here, because you know what Israel Adesanya is going to do. He's a kickboxer. He's got that kickboxing background. That is how he's going to fight. He's going to keep this fight standing, and he's going to keep you with kicks. He's going to fight from the outside. He's going to try and use that long range of his. He's going to vary up the kicks as well, the low kicks, and he switches up really nicely between the body and the head kick as well. So for me, that's one of the things that's most intriguing, is seeing how Robert Whittaker comes into this fight and fares up against someone who's a completely different style to anyone he's fought for years and years now. Robert Whittaker, for me, is one of the toughest fights that anyone can have at middleweight. I mean, he's an excellent boxer. His boxing skills are fantastic. He's no slouch on the ground whatsoever. I mean, we saw in his fights against Yoel Romero. Yes, Romero got him down a couple of times, but he came popping straight back up to his feet. He defended a lot of takedowns, especially in that first fight as well. He defended the takedown really well. And when guys want to take him down, they just can't. I'm not saying that Israel Adesanya is going to try and take him down, because he won't. But just on an overall perspective, he's got that such good all-round game. And then he's so durable as well. I mean, we saw him get absolutely nailed with some shots by Yoel Romero over the course of the two fights, and he just kept coming back for more. You'd look at, I think it was the third round of their last fight, and he got really beaten up. He looked like he was going to get finished. And he just gets this energy and this second wind out of nowhere, and he just keeps marching forward. He's like a zombie. You just can't stop the guy. And man, for me, this is going to go 5 rounds, and it's going to go to a decision. I don't think either guy is going to put the other guy out. I mean, Whittaker does hold power, but so does Kelvin Gastelum. Gastelum hit Adesanya with some of his best shots, and Adesanya was still standing there and taking them. I've just mentioned about Robert Whittaker going up against Yoel Romero, who's got ridiculous power, taking some of Yoel Romero's hardest strikes that he can, and just kept marching down. So I honestly think this is so close to call. I think it's on a knife edge who it goes. I think it's going to be similar to the Yoel Romero fights. I think it's going to be similar to Israel Adesanya's fight against Calvin Gastelum. I think it's going to be one of those fights where it's 2 rounds apiece going into the last round, and man, I just can't wait to see how it fares and how it plays out. But for me, for Whittaker to really impose himself in this fight, obviously we know he needs to get inside that boxing range. He needs to evade the reach advantage of Adesanya. Kelvin Gastelum struggled at points in their fight with in that aspect. He struggled to find his range, but when he did find his range and get on the inside, he hurt Adesanya. Something else I'd like to see Whittaker do, which he doesn't do enough for me, he's tried to use some of his wrestling in this fight. And I mean, he's got good defensive wrestling, but he's also got quite good offensive wrestling. And now don't think that he should come out with a real wrestle heavy game plan like Derek Brunson did, but I'd like to see him mix in a takedown every now and then, because that's going to really get Adesanya thinking. We saw Gastelum take Adesanya down with a really nicely timed shot in their fight. Now, he was only down for a couple of seconds before Adesanya popped back up, but that's really going to get Adesanya thinking if he throws in a couple of early takedown attempts in round 1 and round 2, and that could open up the boxing range and the strikes, the 1-2s, and that big right hand of Robert Whittaker's as the fight wears on. So I'd really like to see him utilise that. For Adesanya, I think more of the same. Just utilise that reach. Don't let Whittaker get on the inside, because, as I mentioned earlier, when Gastelum got on the inside, he rocked Adesanya, and it was when Gastelum put together those combinations, and it was always that last shot in the combination when Adesanya was trying to circulate that he left his chin a little bit exposed, and we saw him get clipped a couple of times. He kind of got temporarily wobbled in the first round, I think it was, and then a bit later on in the fight, the same thing happened. So that's what Whittaker's got to do. He's got to put together the combinations, get on the inside, and catch Adesanya with that third or fourth strike in a combination. If you throw single strikes, I think Adesanya's the better striker with that kickboxing background and that distance control. But Adesanya, he's got to keep it his range and keep the distance, and just make Whittaker stay on the outside. For me, I'm going to go a bit controversial. I'm going to go Adesanya to win this fight. I think he's just going to be able to utilise that range. I think for Adesanya, this is more of a similar stylistic matchup to Gastelum. Obviously, Gastelum's a southpaw, Whittaker isn't, but this is more of a similar stylistic matchup than any of Whittaker's fights against his recent opponents, emulating the kind of style that Adesanya is going to bring. And I just think that could trouble Whittaker a little bit, because as things stand at the moment, he's against Yoel Romero, he's kind of stood up, same sort of height, same sort of reach and things like that. But I just think Adesanya's so long, and when he uses that length and uses that range, he's really effective. And I know we only saw that for 2 or 3 rounds out of the 5 rounds against Gastelum, but if he can put it together again, similar to that fight, I think he's just going to scrape this now. This isn't a confident pick at all, because quite easily Robert Whittaker could come out and do what he's done in the Yoel Romero fights, but I've got to pick someone, and I'm going to go, like I said, it's going slightly controversial and slightly against the grain of what I've seen on social media this week, but I'm picking Israel Adesanya to win this fight. I think he's going to win the narrowest of margins in a decision victory.
Yeah, man, you made some great points there, and I agree with a lot of what you were saying as well, but for me, the reason why I'm saying this is, in my opinion, the best middleweight title in UFC history is just because of who we've got right in front of us and who is going to be standing at the opposite side of the cage from each other, because you've got Robert Whittaker, who's unbeaten at middleweight, tearing through everybody, and then you've got, on the other side, Israel Adesanya, who's 17-0 unbeaten outright in his MMA career. And we're now seeing, and we don't get to see it too often, we have been seeing it a little bit more often from other divisions. Right now, we're seeing the 2 best fighters in the middleweight division fighting each other, and it's not often you say that. Sometimes, you've got the champion versus the number 3 ranked fighter or the number 2 ranked fighter, but we've got right now the best 2 fighters in the division, and they're both, as of right now, of what we know, they're both in their prime, and that's another key aspect to this fight, and how amazing this fight is before the fight, how amazing I think it's going to be during, and I think we're going to be talking about the fight for a long time afterwards as well. So, like I've already mentioned, we'll start with the champion, Robert Whittaker. We have to, because what he's done in his career, the changes that he's made, moving up a division, and where he's at right now compared to where he was, back in 2014 is just unbelievable. After he got knocked out by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, like you said, John, back in February of 2014, if somebody had said to you then Robert Whittaker is going to be a dominant middleweight champion in 5 years' time, you'd have laughed at him. But what Whittaker did is he made that choice to go up to middleweight. I still don't think he was an oversized welterweight, because I think he's probably a little bit of an undersized middleweight, if you're honest, and if you look at other fighters in the division. And the key aspect to that is he moved up off a win. Again, that's another positive thing, because a lot of fighters, they tend to move up when they're on a losing streak or they're coming off a loss or a weight, missing weight, that sort of thing. And it's more of a forced move up, whereas this was Whittaker's choice. He moved up at a time, we're seeing it a lot now, fighters moving up by choice. But back when Whittaker moved up, it wasn't really a done thing. People were trying to move down all the time. So not only that, he was a bang average welterweight. He's made that decision to move up, and he's absolutely torn through everybody in that division. I cannot respect Robert Whittaker enough for what he's done in his career. I just wanted to get that out of the way. You know, I know it's nothing to do with breaking down, well, not a lot to do with breaking down this fight, but I really just wanted to get that out of the way because I respect what he's done unbelievably. Now, looking at his style, he's got an all-round style. He's a good boxer. He's good in the pocket. He's got good fight IQ. He's a good kicker. He joined the Australian national wrestling team to improve his wrestling. His BJJ's good. You know, how many times do we see a fighter, a sixth degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt like Jacare Souza take somebody's back and not submit them? We very rarely see that. When Jacare gets on somebody's back, they're normally out of there. He was on Whittaker's back. Whittaker got him off. Second round, knocked him out. You know, his all-round game is solid. It's just absolutely solid. And the dude's just gone through 50 minutes with Yoel Romero, and that's not 50 minutes with any normal fighter. That's 50 minutes with an athletic freak, a freak of nature, a monster in Romero. And how Whittaker did not get knocked out in that second fight, you just don't know. You've got no idea. You know, he got knocked down. He was getting battered. And you mentioned as well, John, you know, he was popping back up. Romero actually took him down when he was rocked as well, and he still managed to get back up. So, you know, like I said, his all-round game is just phenomenal. And then you flip the switch. We're going to Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya is probably the most elusive, creative, experienced striker that we've seen in the middleweight division since the prime Anderson Silva, and I think it's quite fair me saying that as well. You know, I think that's also the reason why, you know, I know Silva wasn't in his prime when they fought and Adesanya was, but I also think that's the reason why their fight was so close, because Adesanya, it was the first time he'd seen anybody like himself, you know, that had that weird, creative, elusive striking. You know, yes, Silva was a step or two off due to age and decline and stuff like that, but man, Adesanya is on the feet. I just think he's the most superior striker in the entire division, and I think in any straight up striking fight, I think Adesanya beats everybody in the division. But listen, this isn't a kickboxing fight. It's not K1. It's not Glory. This is mixed martial arts. And there's going to be a lot of other elements to this fight opposed to, you know, a striking battle. Even though I do think predominantly the fight is going to take place on the feet. But Adesanya's striking is unbelievable. His vision and awareness of danger is just second to none. His accuracy, his quick thinking, his reactions inside the cage, again, is just unbelievable. And what that allows him to do, it allows him to be creative. It allows him, because he can think so fast, he can fire kicks, and you know, he can throw punches from the hips, and those are the punches that you don't really see coming because they come from so low down the body. And like I say, he's creative, and he can fire at numerous angles. You know, he's quick. He can get out the pocket. He can exit when he needs to. He can cut off the cage if he's the one coming forward. He'll throw elbows, knees, like I said, some really unorthodox, elusive stuff that it's just really hard to prepare a fight camp for Adesanya, because how do you get someone to emulate what he does to that degree? It's just so difficult. So, like I say, on both sides here, you're looking at a fight that's, like I say, that is predominantly going to take place on the feet, but they're two completely different styles. Now, for me, I feel that Adesanya has fought a similar guy to Whittaker in his last fight in Gastelum. Now, if that fight had not happened and this was the title fight, there would be so many question marks and so many red flags from my perspective anyway, because before the Gastelum fight, Adesanya hadn't fought anybody to the level of Whittaker or to the style of Whittaker, so it'd have been a little bit more difficult to break down, because you'd have just been constantly asking yourself questions. But I don't think that Whittaker has fought anybody like Adesanya. I think Adesanya is going to be able to do things inside the cage on Saturday night, Sunday morning if you're in the UK. I think Adesanya is going to be able to do things inside the cage on the night that Whittaker won't expect, that won't have seen before, and will have to make the in-cage adjustments. And I think Whittaker can make in-cage adjustments because his fight IQ is also really good. And like I say, it's a crazy fight. Now, Robert Whittaker's path to victory, I agree with you, John. I think he has to mix in the takedowns, even if he's not shooting in to be fully committed to take Adesanya down or to hold him down if he does get him down, but just to mix things up, because Whittaker has to make this a mixed martial arts fight. He can't just stand there with Adesanya for 5 rounds, because Adesanya, in my opinion, is the superior striker. Like I've already mentioned, more creative, more elusive, higher volume, more accurate. So Whittaker has to make this a mixed martial arts fight. He's got to shoot in takedowns. I don't expect the fight to be won and lost on the mat. I think Adesanya, that's a part of his game. When you see a striker with a decorated kickboxing background come into mixed martial arts, you always are concerned about the takedown defense, the get-up game, how urgent they are and stuff like that. And I think Adesanya's fine, man. You know, we've seen him getting taken down. He's popped back up. We've seen him scramble. He tried to hit Gastelum with a triangle. So I think Adesanya's fine on the mat, but like I say, just to break the fight up a little bit, that'd be really smart of Whittaker to do, just to mix that in. But like I say, I just don't feel that the fight's going to be won and lost on the mat. I think it's going to be won and lost on the feet. And over 25 minutes, when you've got a fight that, like I've already mentioned, that I think is going to predominantly be on the feet, I have to favour Adesanya in this fight, because I just feel that he's gonna land the more volume. He's gonna cut off the cage. He's gonna be able to exit an angle most of the time. I do think Whittaker is definitely gonna have success in this fight. Don't twist my words here. Whittaker is gonna have success. He's gonna land on Adesanya, and he's gonna win a round or two. But I just, like I say, over the course of 25 minutes, I just have to favour who I believe is the most superior striker. Now, I've heard a lot of people, and it seems to be the general consensus, say that we've seen what Gastelum did to Adesanya, and Whittaker will only do that and more because he's better at everything that Gastelum was doing. And I disagree with that. And the reason why I disagree is because I feel like they've got two types of pressure games. So what Gastelum was doing is Gastelum was constantly moving forward like a zombie. He was constantly coming forward. If he was getting hit, it didn't matter. If he dropped or wobbled, it didn't matter. He would constantly be moving forward and throwing the combinations, and Whittaker throws combinations as well, so that's going to help him out in this fight. But Whittaker doesn't have that same pressure game. Whittaker doesn't constantly move forward. Whittaker's a little bit more tactile than that. So Whittaker will stay on the outside a little bit longer than what Gastelum does. He'll try and make his reads. He'll try and get inside a little bit safer than Gastelum. Gastelum's he's a Mexican. The dudes, all Mexicans have got iron chins. You know what I mean? So he could walk forward and eat some shots. I know he was getting dropped later in the fight, and people will mention that, but especially early on when they were both fresh, he was walking through the shots. And Whittaker, I'm not saying he can't walk through shots, because look at what Romero did to him, but he's just got a different pressure game. So he will stay on the outside. He will take a little bit of time. He will be making reads and trying to get in safely. But what that'll allow Adesanya to do with his reach and range, and this is where it becomes a case of Adesanya's more different than any fighter that Whittaker's ever fought before, because Whittaker won't be able to get away with those quiet moments inside the cage. Whittaker waits and then bursts, where Gastelum zombied forward and threw combinations. Now, when Whittaker in those quiet periods is making his reads and stuff like that, I'm not saying he's just going to be there to be hit, but that will give Adesanya time to start thinking about strikes himself, starting to get strikes off on him. Adesanya won't wait for Whittaker to come in. Adesanya will go first when he can go first. And also, when you're giving a striker as creative as Adesanya a little bit of time to think, it's a really dangerous thing. And the other stylistic thing that I'm not too sure of with Whittaker, and I do think he has to cut this out in this fight, is he throws kicks from the same side as his punches, but he throws the kicks inside the pocket. And I think it's a really dangerous thing to do against Adesanya, because even though he can exit out quite quickly and quite safely, Adesanya is really fast. And again, I keep using the word creative. He's really fast, really creative, and he's got really, really good reactions, and he's accurate. And I can see some straight shots actually hitting Whittaker if he's coming into the pocket, throwing a 1-2 combination and then following it with a head kick inside the pocket. I know Gastelum threw a head kick and wobbled Adesanya and hurt him. I get that side of it, but he did that sort of from the outside coming in, whereas Whittaker comes in, throws his combinations, kicks, then exits. And I think he's got to cut that out. If he starts throwing that kick inside the pocket, I can see him getting countered quite badly from Adesanya. It's a close fight. Whittaker as I've already mentioned, he's going to have success. He's got to get inside. He's got to mix things up with his wrestling. But predominantly, I think the fight's going to take place on the feet. For me, I think the superior striker is Israel Adesanya. I agree with you, John. I think it goes 5 rounds. So I'm picking Israel Adesanya to win, to become the new middleweight champion. I'm taking him to win via decision. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, in the co-main event, again, another good fight in my opinion. We've got Raging Al Iaquinta versus Dan the Hangman Hooker. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is another good fight, and a fight that I do like, and I do think will be an entertaining scrap because again, both these guys are super tough. We saw that in Al Iaquinta's last fight against Donald Cerrone, where he got busted up real bad, but he just keeps marching forward. Does Raging Al, he takes no back steps, and we saw that from Dan Hooker as well in the Barbosa fight. I know he got stopped in the 3rd round after he took an absolute beating, absolute hammering, but man, he showed some real heart in that. So again, I think this is going to be a good fight between two very capable fighters and two very good guys to watch as well. And for me, when I'm breaking down this fight for Al Iaquinta, it's kind of similar to what I was mentioning with Robert Whittaker as well, especially with regards to the wrestling. Now, Al Iaquinta's a good wrestler, and again, we don't see enough from him. We see his defensive wrestling. I know he got taken down several times by Khabib, but in some of the wrestling exchanges he fared quite well. And again, against like Kevin Lee, I think he did get taken down a couple of times, but he managed to hold his own and beat him up on the feet to get that decision win. And it's just something that in this fight I think will really help Al Iaquinta. I think if he threatens to throw in some takedowns and mix it up a little bit and be willing to just even shoot, maybe not even the intention of going for the full-blown takedown, but just getting Dan Hooker thinking about it, I think makes it a lot more of a difficult fight for Dan Hooker in this circumstance, because Dan Hooker's going to want this fight to play standing. He's going to want to stand and trade with Al Iaquinta, and for me personally, I think he has the edge in the striking battle. I think that background training at Tiger Muay Thai, I think that really is going to help him. Obviously, he trains with Adesanya as well, so he's going to pick up some things from him. And for me, Al Iaquinta's striking he's quite one-dimensional. I think he's got a good jab. He's got decent boxing, but he doesn't really tend to mix it up too well. I think he's quite predictable when it comes to striking, and for me, he tends to do well against those guys like the Kevin Lees of the world, who are predominantly wrestlers but are also decent strikers, so they don't mind trying to strike with him, and then they end up losing because Iaquinta's a better striker and he can deal with their wrestling, like I say, with his defensive wrestling skills. But when he comes up against really good strikers, I do think that he does he does struggle, and we saw that in the Cerrone fight. And now I know that you've got to look a long way back for his last defeat prior to the Khabib fight, but when you look at some of the names that he's fought, I'm still a bit unsure. I mean, Masvidal, 2015, Masvidal was journeyman Masvidal. Sorry to say that, Jorge.
He lost that fight as well.
Yeah, he did.
Get that straight in. I don't know how Al Iaquinta managed to get the judges to score that fight.
Yeah, that was a real robbery. But that wasn't the Masvidal that we've seen now at middleweight. And then his wins against Joe Lozon, Diego Sanchez, Ross Pearson. Now, these fighters are good fighters, and at the time he fought them were decent. Maybe Diego Sanchez 2017 was a bit shot, but I mean Joe Lozon in 2015, Ross Pearson in 2014, but they're not the elite of the elite. And then when he comes up against people like that, obviously Khabib beats everybody, so I'm kind of ruling that out. But it was just his last fight against Donald Cerrone, who obviously we know is a fantastic striker. It was just that fight that has got me worried for Al Iaquinta in this fight, because Cerrone really pieced him up, and he's piecing him up with that jab. He really busted him up with the jab and the 1-2s, and I do like Dan Hooker's. I do like his striking. I mean, we saw it against James Vick. He came out very early and started throwing those low calf kicks, which I really like, because straight away that gets you thinking. Even if you check one of them, if you get caught with 3 or 4 of those, especially early on in the first round, instantly in the back of your mind there, you're thinking about checking that leg kick. And then when you're thinking about checking the leg kick, you don't see the jab coming, you don't see the right hand coming, and that's when you start to get exposed and allow your opponent to land their boxing combinations. And another thing in this fight as well is Dan Hooker's tall. He's a rangy guy for this weight class. Now, Iaquinta's not too much shorter than him. I think there's only a couple of inches in it, but just their stance as well. Iaquinta's got that low stance. He tends to slouch a little bit, whereas Hooker really does use his range. He uses his height. He uses every inch of his frame to when he's striking, and that's something else that I really like. And he hits hard, man. I mean, he's a dangerous guy. He hits with power. We saw that against James Vick, first round knockout. We saw that against Gilbert Burns, first round knockout. We saw that against Jim Miller, that big knee. I mean, we saw it against Ross Pearson, that huge knee as well. He's a dangerous guy, and when the fight does hit the mat as well, he has got submission. So that's something, if Iaquinta does go in with that game plan, he'll also have to think about. But for me, I'm going with Dan Hooker in this fight. I think that his range of striking, his arsenal of striking, he's going to be too much for Iaquinta. I think that he's going to be able to land on him. I think he's going to be able to hurt him, similar to Donald Cerrone. Now, I don't think Hooker's quite on the same level striking wise as Cerrone, but I think he's more than capable. I think he's more than adequate to land on Iaquinta. I mean, I think Al's going to have to really mix it up in order to keep Dan Hooker thinking. And very similar to the breakdown that we just had in the Whittaker Adesanya fight. If this does remain entirely standing for 3 rounds, which again I think it will, because both guys are tough. Both guys are durable. I think it's going to be a 3-0 war. I think if it plays out the majority of the time on the feet, I think that Dan Hooker is going to have the more success. So for that reason, very similar to the Adesanya breakdown, I'm going with Dan Hooker to win a decision in this fight.
Yeah, man, I like Iaquinta. I feel that at this point right now, obviously he's been in the UFC for a long time, for many years, and we've seen him against different opponents, different styles as well. And I just feel that right now we can get a really good read of sort of where he's at against the different styles of opponents that he fights. So what I mean by that is, I think he actually, even though he's more predominantly a boxer than anything else, he is an all-round fighter. As you've already mentioned, he has got hands, he's got his kicks, he mixes them in. He has got wrestling, and obviously he's under Serra Longo as well, so his jiu-jitsu is going to be really good. And even though, like I was saying, even though he's predominantly a boxer, I feel that he just does so much better against fighters that are more wrestling heavy than fighters that are long strikers. So, like, take the Khabib fight, for example. Yes, he lost sort of 50, 45, 43, 44, whatever it was. He got dominated by Khabib just like everybody else does. But the flip side to that is, I actually think his performance in regards to staying in there and being remotely competitive was better than pretty much everybody else that Khabib's fought, at least recently. I mean, look at Poirier, Khabib got him out of there. Look at McGregor, Khabib got him out of there. I've just mentioned 2 huge names right there, and that I believe Iaquinta has gone in there and done better against, or stayed more relatively competitive against Khabib than those 2 did. So I just think he's much better against the wrestling heavy fighters. Kevin Lee's another good example. He was able to stuff the takedowns. He was able to mentally break Kevin Lee down, because once the takedowns weren't there and they weren't working and he was standing back up, he was then able to start pushing forward and dominate the fight, because his opponent's game was not working. And like I say, it can sort of demoralize a fighter when that happens. However, when you look back at the strikers that he's fought, so the 2 that I'm going to mention here, Jorge Masvidal, which I rudely interrupted you, John. He lost that fight, in my opinion. I don't understand how the judges scored that fight to Iaquinta at all. And then you look at the Donald Cerrone fight, and again, that was an accurate breakdown from both of us on that podcast when we broke that fight down as well, because Cerrone was the underdog on the night that we both took. And the technical fighters that can fight at the different ranges very well are the fighters that Iaquinta is going to get stuck against, in my opinion. And Dan Hooker is is exactly that. He's a striker, trains at City Kickboxing over in New Zealand, like you've already mentioned with Israel Adesanya. So and a whole host of the other guys that are there. I'm not going to start reeling every one of them off, but it's a really good gym, and they're producing some really good fighters out of that gym, and Dan Hooker's just one of them. But you look at his resume, man, like Ross Pearson finish, Mark Diakese finish, Jim Miller finish, Gilbert Burns finish, James Vick finish. Yes, he got beat up by Edson Barboza, but listen, if that tells you anything, that tells you how fucking durable Dan Hooker is to take the beating that he took. And like I've said time and time again, his corner and the referee should both be disgusted that they didn't stop that fight earlier, because it could have caused some serious damage to Dan Hooker. And that was one of my worries when he came into his next fight against James Vick, of how he was going to look. Fortunately, he took some shots. He looked absolutely fine. And, it doesn't seem that beating from Barboza has actually had any sort of long-term damage or effect on him, which is a really good thing. Now, in that James Vick fight, I just want to talk about this as well really quickly, because I've not heard anybody really drive in on how Hooker knocked James Vick out. And if you've got UFC Fight Pass, load it up, load this fight up, and just before the knockout, hit that slow button and watch this in slow-mo, because what Dan Hooker knocked James Vick out with was absolutely astonishing. So he was in the range, if you've not seen it, and he goes to throw a right hand, and just in the middle of that punch leaving his body, and just before it lands on James Vick, he pulls the right hand, switches the left hook round, as Vick has already gone to target that right hand to deal with that, to defend it. He's pulled the hand mid punch, flipped the left hook round, caught him on the jaw and knocked him out. And man, the IQ, the vision, the ability to pull that off is just, I can't stress how impressed I was with that maneuver. To throw a punch in real time, notice that your opponent's about to defend it, pull it, and then switch to a left hook on the opposite side, land on the jaw and knock him out. Wow, the dude is a high level striker. And the two things that I think is going to cause Iaquinta problems in this fight. First of all, the fact that he's got a chin, because Iaquinta, once he really gets going, pushes forward, starts bursting forward and landing shots. If he catches you on the chin, it's going to be good night. So the fact that Hooker's got a decent chin, and I feel like he's got a decent chin because I saw Gilbert Burns load a bomb on him and it didn't even look like it affected him too much. Obviously, this is MMA, the 4-ounce gloves, anything can happen. But the other thing as well is something you've mentioned, John, that you'd like to see Iaquinta shooting takedowns. I think that's dangerous. Like, look at what happened to Mark Diakese when he shot in a takedown on Dan Hooker on the feet. He got submitted. Dan Hooker can wrap a neck up really well. Gilbert Burns shot in on Dan Hooker, and for a second there I thought, nah, he's not going to submit Gilbert Burns. And it was tight, it was close, and he just used it and to end up reversing the position and standing back up. So I think the fight's going to predominantly take place on the feet. I think the more superior striker is Dan Hooker. Now, from Iaquinta's point of view, he's got to get inside. He's got to work in this fight, and it's a good job that the dude's got cardio over 3, 4, and 5 rounds. Obviously, I know it's only 3 rounds. That's all he needs. But the point I'm mentioning, he's got good cardio, and thank God for that, because if he didn't have cardio, this fight wouldn't be competitive. Because what Iaquinta's going to have to do is constantly work. He's going to have to be the one constantly trying to cut off the cage, constantly trying to push Hooker back, constantly just trying to get inside that range, because if he stays on the outside at kicking range, he's going to get beaten up. If he comes in on the clinch, he's got elbows and knees to worry about. Also, with him being a little bit smaller, it's going to be easier for Hooker to wrap a neck up inside that distance as well. He's got to stay inside that boxing range, and he can do it. He's got the ability to do it. I do feel that he was off a little bit against Cowboy. I thought that on another night, that fight would have been a lot more competitive. And I think he is going to be competitive with Hooker. I think he is going to get inside at times. I think he is going to land shots. That's where Hooker's going to need his good chin, because he's not going to get out of this fight unscathed. And Iaquinta will keep pushing forward and it'll cause Hooker problems. However, I have to lean Hooker. I just feel that Iaquinta's got a couple of tendencies his striking defense that Hooker can take advantage of with his striking offense. So things like when he bursts forward, he leaves himself open for counters, whether that be the straight punches, which is what Cowboy Cerrone dropped Iaquinta with, whether that be a left hook with what Dan Hooker's been knocking everybody out with, whether, Dan Hooker also dropped Gilbert Burns with a straight shot as well before he knocked him out with a left hook. Iaquinta, ducks his head a little bit too much when he's throwing punches. That knee that he's not piercing and Jim Miller out with. So I just feel that there's a few tendencies here for Iaquinta that bad tendencies that I think Dan Hooker can take advantage of. But if Dan Hooker's off his game, man, it's going to be a long night for him, because Iaquinta is that dirty, grinding type of fighter that is tough. He's never been knocked out. He's a fighter that can eat shots himself. I know he was dropped against Cerrone, but listen, like I've already mentioned, the 4-ounce gloves, and you can easily get dropped by a punch in mixed martial arts inside the octagon. So I do feel that stylistically Dan Hooker has advantages over Al, but Dan Hooker has got to be on his game here. He's got to be sharp. If he's sloppy, if he starts slowly, it could be, like I said, it could be a long night for him, because let's say, for example, he does start slowly and Iaquinta takes round 1, right? That's then an uphill battle for Hooker, because he's got to win 2 rounds against a fighter that's going to have already made his reads, that's going to be in the cage, just needing 1 more round to win, and basically just as long as he doesn't get finished, wins the fight. So it's a really good fight. Like I say, stylistically I favoured Dan Hooker, but he's got to be sharp on the night, and he's just got to be on his game. If he's not, it's going to be a long night for him. So I'm going to take Dan Hooker to win. I think that he may drop Iaquinta again if the fights really go in his way. But I'm going to give Iaquinta the benefit of the doubt, the fact that he's never been knocked out before. I know Hooker finishes a lot of guys. I think that he could hurt Iaquinta, but I'm going to stick with Iaquinta in regards to the fact that he'll be able to stay in the fight. I'm going to take Dan Hooker to win. I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, in the heavyweight division, we've got Tuivasa fighting at home against Sergey Spivak. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is an interesting fight. Obviously, Tuivasa's coming in on the back of 2 defeats now against Blago Ivanov and Junior Dos Santos. Spivak lost his UFC debut against Walt Harris back in May. So both these guys are really going to be looking to get back in the win column, and yeah, Tuivasa's one of those guys that I'm still struggling to get my head around and try and weigh out where he is in the division. Because obviously we saw him come in against Rashad Coulter and land that massive flying knee, which was fantastic and got everyone talking, got up everyone out their seats. And then he followed that up against Cyril Asker with the first round finish as well. But I mean, his last 3 fights, he's looked pretty ordinary to me. The Arlovsky fight was a pretty close fight. Obviously came out with the decision win. Junior Dos Santos, he looked all right for the first round. He looked decent, but then Dos Santos' quality showed through and he put him away in the second round. Then the Ivanov fight again was quite even, I thought. Obviously Ivanov won the unanimous decision, but I thought Tuivasa did all right in that fight, especially first round. He spent some good time in the clinch, but then he just seemed to kind of slow down and just lose his momentum and allow Ivanov to get back in the fight and allow him to land on him. And yeah, for me, like I say, for a heavyweight at 26 years old, he's still very young, so he's still got a lot to learn. He's definitely still room for improvement from him. In this fight, for me, I think that he's going to want to utilise those knees and elbows. Now, something I do really like about Tuivasa is the knees and elbows from the clinch. Now, we saw it in the first round of the Ivanov fight. He spent a lot of time holding Ivanov up in the clinch against the fence. And then he used those elbows and he kept trying to land those elbows whenever they separated. The Junior Dos Santos fight as well, he very nearly landed an absolutely huge elbow. I think it was in the first round that could quite easily have put Dos Santos out if it would have landed. It didn't land, so obviously the fight carried on and we saw what happened. But that's when I think Tuivasa's at his most dangerous, when he's using all of the strikes available to him and he's not just using his boxing, because I think that when he does just use his boxing, I think he kind of tends to run out of ideas and he kind of gets a bit I don't know whether the sloppy is the right word, or whether just a bit one-dimensional. But and then as the fatigue and stuff starts to kick in, he lets his opponents take over and take charge. And yeah, I'd like to see a Tuivasa that can maintain his pressure for 3 rounds, 3 hard rounds, and like I say, just using all the tools available to him, not just relying heavily on the boxing and mixing in those leg kicks, because he's got some real heavy leg kicks as well. We saw that against Ivanov, who's landed that inside leg kick really, really heavy, causing real damage on that to that lead leg, and Ivanov was really hobbling on that towards the end of the fight. So for me, Tuivasa to win this fight, he's got to mix it up, but he's got to be able to do it for more than a round. Now, Spivak, again, he's a bit of an unknown quantity because his UFC debut against Walt Harris was pretty much terrible. I mean, as far as debuts go, you can't really do much worse. He lost after 50 seconds of round one. I think he threw one strike in the entirety of the fight and until the point he was finished, and he just kind of looked a bit blinded by the lights. But obviously, when you look at his record, he is more than capable. I mean, he's got, prior to being signed to the UFC, I think it was 5 or 6 first round finishes in a row, possibly even more if I'm just looking at his record now. But he's a finisher predominantly from where he's fought before. But again, something that we talk about so often is there's levels to this, and Tuivasa has gone up against guys like Junior Dos Santos and Blago Ivanov, who's been around for a long time, Andrei Arlovski, who's been around for a long time. Now, I know he's only 1 and 2 against those guys, but that's a completely different ballgame to fighting guys in other promotions that haven't been at the top level. Now, I know that Spivak, I think we talked about this in the breakdown for his Walt Harris fight, he's fought the mighty Travis Fulton, who's fought about 400 times in his career. But outside of that, I mean, the guys that he's fighting have got very mixed records. When you look at his last fight prior to coming to the UFC, was against a guy, Tony Lopez. Now, he was about 45 years old, I think, at the time. And man, Tony Lopez looked like he was an old 45 as well. Man, he taking nothing away from the guy, but I'm not entirely sure about the level of competition he's fought before. Now, one thing that I did like in that fight was the combinations that Spivak was throwing. He was throwing punches in bunches. He was mixing his combinations up. When Tony Lopez was up against the fence, he was really unwinding with those shots and reeling off 4, 5, 6 shot combinations. And that's what he's got to do in this fight against Tuivasa. I think if he has the chance to back Tuivasa up, which will be difficult because Tuivasa doesn't like to take a back step, but when he does have those opportunities, he's got to throw strikes. He's got to let his hands go, because he just didn't do that against Walt Harris, and he got caught and he got hurt and obviously finished very early. So for me, Spivak's path to victory is combinations and high output, and if he can maintain a high output, I think he'll be able to give Tuivasa a real difficult time. But for me, I'm going with Tai Tuivasa to win this fight. I do think Tai Tuivasa is level above Spivak. I mean, the level of competition that they've fought at this point in their career, Tuivasa's fought some of the top level guys in the UFC, and for me, it's going to be Tai Tuivasa to win this fight. I think not only does he possess the power, we've seen that. We saw him rock Ivanov with strikes. He landed a heavy shot that wobbled him. We saw those leg kicks, but he's obviously we've seen what he can do as well against the guys like Rashad Coulter and Cyril Asker, who aren't the top of the top level in the UFC, but are still a dangerous level. And for me, just as long as Tuivasa mixes it up, like I say, utilises the elbows out of the clinch, maintains his busyness and doesn't rely too heavily just on the boxing. If he mixes in the kicks, I think he's going to an opportunity is going to present itself where he lands a big strike on Spivak and wobbles him and then finishes him off. So I'm going with Tai Tuivasa to win this fight. I think he wins via knockout in round 2.
Yeah, it's like you said, Spivak's just a really unknown quantity right now, and you can't really take too much from his UFC debut against Walt Harris, because Walt Harris is on a tear right now. He's a guy that's been in the octagon under the bright lights, that's knocked out fighters inside the UFC cage. So he's a guy that was comfortable in there, and all he had to do was back Spivak up with a few hard shots and really unload on him, and that's pretty much what he did, and it only took him 50 seconds. So that's all we've really seen from Spivak at the highest level of, like I say, the UFC. But Tai Tuivasa on the other hand, again, he's a fighter that I feel like I want to love more than what I do, and I feel that his last fight against Blagoy Ivanov was a massive step backwards for him. And I don't mean any disrespect to Blagoy Ivanov. You know, I know I pretty much pick against the guy in every fight that he's had in the UFC, but in fact, I've bet against him in every fight in the UFC. Won one, got robbed on one, and obviously lost the Tuivasa one. But I feel that any fighter inside the top 15 has got a really good chance of beating Ivanov just because of his style, his slow plodding movement, and how he fights. And I really did expect Tuivasa to beat Ivanov just by pure volume and just landing on him. And obviously that wasn't to be. You know, Ivanov stuck in there and won a couple of rounds and got a unanimous decision. But I just feel that that's the type of fight that I'd have expected, and I think the UFC might have expected that as well. That's the type of fight that you'd expect a young fighter in Tai Tuivasa to really come into his own. You know, he'd taken a loss against Junior Dos Santos. He didn't look amazing in the Arlovsky fight before that, so I think the UFC really just wanted to give him a fight where he could really shine, and his performance just wasn't there over 3 rounds. You know, it's more of a case of, I feel that for him, if he can't get a fighter out there in the first round, maybe a little bit of self-doubt comes in regards to can his cardio hold up to out volume a fighter at heavyweight. You know, it's tough to do, they're really big dudes. But again, like I say, the weakness that Tai Tuivasa's got is his ground game. You know, he can get taken down, and when he is on his back, he can look a little lost. You know, he's clearly predominantly a striker opposed to a wrestler or a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist. And when you look at Spivak's wins, you know, he's got 5 wins via submission, neck cranks, rear naked chokes, arm bars, kimuras. So he's got a wide variety of submissions under his belt now. To what competition they were at, we don't know. The only one that we do know, like you've already mentioned, the Travis Fulton, who was 255 for 54. You know what I mean? So he's fought an experienced guy at least in Travis Fulton. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And I really do hope we see some more of Spivak's ground game. I'd hate for him to go out the UFC after spending like a combined 2 minutes inside the cage and suffering 2 knockouts and, you know, handed his walking papers and off he goes. I do want to see what the kid's about, and I call him a kid. He's 24 years old. He's younger than Tai Tuivasa. So, you know, you mentioned about athletes and fighters progressing at a young age. We can be seeing that with Spivak. Obviously, we won't see that progression from Walt Harris to this fight because it only lasted 50 seconds. But for me, I feel that Spivak has got to try and get this fight to the floor. I think that what worried me with the Walt Harris fight is the second that he got hit with 1 or 2 shots, and it wasn't any more than 2. He really, once he felt the power, he shelled up. He went backwards. He shelled up, and you cannot do that at this level of mixed martial arts, and especially as a heavyweight because they just hit so fucking hard. So that's a big concern, and I feel that that's more of a bad trait than maybe a one-off that happened in that fight after he felt Harris's power, because Tai Tuivasa's got power. So that if that is a bad trait of Spivak, then Tai Tuivasa, all he has to do is hit him hard a couple of times, and we could see that shell come back out, and Tuivasa can unload on him on the cage like he did against Cyril Asker. Spivak's got to try and get this fight to the mat. He has to. I feel like he's got a bad trait in regards to feeling power and shelling up. And I feel that he could do that in this fight if he feels a few hard shots. just for Spivak, don't mess about. Try and get the fight to the mat and really work Tuivasa on the mat. You've got submissions on your record. You're clearly comfortable on the mat. You clearly know what you're doing in your submission game. That's your path to victory. Try and take Tuivasa down from the get-go. But all fighters start standing. Tuivasa's imposing. He's in his home country. He's going to be coming forward. He's going to have momentum behind him. I think he is going to land 1 or 2 hard shots. I think he is going to back Spivak up against the cage. I think he is going to unload on him. I think he is going to knock him out. So I'm taking Tuivasa to win. I'm going to take him to win by a knockout. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA main card, 2 newcomers into the UFC. We've got the home country fighter Justin Tafa versus the Dana White Contender Series fighter Yorgan Castro. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this fight because I think it's going to be really fun. I mean, how can you not like a big heavyweight showdown, a 3-0 heavyweight going up against a guy who's 5-0, both of them relative newcomers, which sometimes can mean that things could get a little bit wild in there. Now, I'm really interested to see how these 2 guys fare in their UFC debut. Obviously, as I've just mentioned, it's their debut for both of them, so sometimes that can have an impact on how they perform and their fighting style. We've seen that so many times before, but man, it's just so it's just such an unknown, and that's something that I'm looking forward to. Now, if you look at Justin Tafa, if you look at his record, like I say, he's only fought 3 times, got 3 wins. The last 2 fights have been knockouts. Second round, 30 seconds into the second round, his last fight. 28 seconds into the first round against Jeremy Joyner in the fight before that, and then second round knockout the fight before that. And something that I really like about Tafa is not only does he look a real physical heavyweight, he looks like he's got a really good build. He's not one of these like overly big flabby heavyweights we see, but he's not also a heavyweight who's just pure muscle and has the potential to gas really quickly. He's got a very good build for heavyweight in my opinion, and I like the fact that he's really athletic. If you watch some of his fights previously, man, he comes out swinging, he throws combinations, he throws heat, he mixes up his strikes, he throws in nice kicks as well, and he's got real power, he's got real finishing power. I mean, if you look at the Jeremy Joyner fight, which was the fight before last, that was when he was fighting for the XFC title, and he won the belt off Jeremy Joyner. He came out the blocks, man, like a dog out the traps, man. It was ridiculous. It was he just absolutely came flying out. He landed heavy early on, and as soon as he sees that his opponent is hurting the slightest, as soon as he smells that blood and smells that finish, he's all over you, and he just lands heavy shots over and over again until the referee stops the fight. Now, Yorgan Castro is an interesting proposition. It's an interesting fight. We saw him get the win in this contender series against Alton Meeks. It was a really interesting finish actually, because he was I don't want to say a tame first round. There's some heavy shots landed, but right at the end of that first round, he landed just one huge leg kick that kind of really buckled the knee of Alton Meeks, and he was in absolute agony. He was down on the floor and he was done, and a few follow-up strikes later, and the referee was waving this fight off, and you can tell that he does have power in his hands. You can tell that he does have power in those kicks, especially those leg kicks. It's not very often you see guys finished with leg kicks, especially in the first round, especially when you're not just throwing leg kicks over and over again. I mean, it was kind of just one huge leg kick, and that was it. He was done. So again, another very, very dangerous guy that has power to put you away. Now, the only thing I'd say about Yorgan Castro that I've noticed in a couple of his fights is that he tends to just throw one heavy strike at a time. He doesn't necessarily always link up those strikes and throw combinations, which I always worry about, especially some heavyweights. If you know you've got some power and you know you've got one punch power or one strike power, sometimes you get a bit complacent and just hide behind that one shot, and in your brain you're kind of thinking, I'm constantly going for the knockout or I can't do anything else, but really you're not setting up those power strikes, and you're making it easier for your opponent to read your game plan, to read when the strikes are coming, and that makes life a lot more dangerous for you. And ultimately, I think that is going to be the difference maker in this fight. I think that De Castro does throw those single strikes too often from what I've seen. Now, I will admit I haven't seen a great deal on him, but I have seen bits of him, and that's something that I did pick up on the film that I saw. But whereas on the other hand, Tafa, from what I saw, comes out like a bull in a china shop. He will throw combinations. He throws them heavy as well, and he's relentless. He, like I say, when he smells an opportunity, he jumps on it, and he tries to take that opportunity. And for that reason, I think that at some point he will catch De Castro with something, and I think he'll just swarm until the fight's over. So for that reason, I'm going with Justin Tafa to win this fight, and I think he wins via knockout.
Yeah, man, these are two big boys that are just going to be throwing heat, throwing leather, and someone's taking a nap in this fight, you know. In regards to Justin Tafa, though, I know a couple of people out in Australia over that side of the world, and I was hearing, not a huge amount of hype, but a little bit of hype, a little bit of excitement from them coming from this kid. So I was really intrigued to look into Tafa and just see how good he actually was. He's got a kickboxing background competitively, so he's transitioned from that sport into MMA, which is, again, like I mentioned earlier on with Adesanya, it's always really interesting. There's a lot of different aspects that you look for in the world of mixed martial arts when a fighter's transitioned from another discipline. And it was, like I say, I was really intrigued to watch Justin Tafa. Now, I'm not sure whether it's just because he's 3-0, he's still relatively green, and he's still got a lot of learning and a lot of improving to do, but I wasn't too impressed with what I saw from him right now. And like I say, at 3-0, I don't really expect a fighter to be polished, a fighter to be really crisp and clean, and not have any mistakes in the locker. But the reason why I was just a little bit unimpressed is because of that kickboxing background. I just expected him to be maybe a little bit quicker, throwing more combinations, throwing volume, and it's not really what I saw from him. It tends to be one or two shots. Obviously, power behind the shots. He hits like an absolute truck, and the kicks aren't as frequent as what I'd expect him to be coming from a kickboxing background. So I'd like to see him use a little bit more of that side of his game, and also the gas tank as well. Sort of when he gets out of when he gets to sort of the end of the first round into the second round, he does tend to slow down quite a lot, and those one or two shots definitely turn into him looking to land one big shot. And he's got that type of style right now. And on the opposite side of the cage, I was at this point thinking, well, Yorgan De Castro could be really live in this fight. So then I went and watched his tape, and it's tough to read too much from the Alton Meeks fight, because Meeks is a guy that was trying to take him down, and the fact, like you said, John, the fight ended with a hard leg kick that just seemed to buckle him, and again, you just wanted to see more of the fight. So we're not really sure exactly where De Castro is either. He has gone to a decision once, and he has also finished a fight in round 3, which tells me that he can hold some sort of cardio for 15 minutes, which is more than what I can say right now for Justin Tafa. And Tafa might have improved, and that might be one element of his game that he's worked on: his cardio, his gas tank, his diet, nutrition, whatever it is that was causing the deficiency in his gas tank. He could have been working on that. I'm sure he is working on that. You've got to prepare to go 3 rounds in mixed martial arts, especially the UFC, because knockouts just don't come as easy as what they do on the regional scene. But having said that, I will worry about Tafa in this fight if it gets out the first round. If Yorgan De Castro can get out the first round with Tafa and make him work in that first round, then I think he's going to win the fight. Whether that be knocks him out, or if he slows a little bit himself, he could probably win a decision. I struggle to believe that Castro's gas tank wouldn't outlast Tafa's. But having said that, I think Tafa is he is good in that first round. He does land the 1-2 combinations. He does pack power. He will find a chin. If he can hurt De Castro, then he's got an opportunity to knock him out and put him away. If he doesn't put him away, then that can have a negative impact on De Castro down the stretch. Again, you got to consider all possibilities, even though I do think the fighting's in a knockout. So if that does affect De Castro down the stretch, then Tafa could probably rack up some volume on points. How much volume, we don't know, but I don't think it's leaving the first round. I think the two big heavyweights, I think they're going to come out swinging. I think in the first round, Tafa's just a little bit sharper with the hands, a little bit more accurate with the hands, and because he hits so fucking hard, if he lands 1 or 2 shots on Yorgan De Castro, I just don't see De Castro being conscious for very much longer after those punches land. If it gets out round 1, then I think it's De Castro's fight. But like I say, I think it finishes in the first 5 minutes. For that reason, I'm going to take Justin Tafa to win, and I'm taking him to win via knockout. And in the final fight on the Newsome MMA main card, the final full breakdown, we've got Jake Matthews in his home country against Rostem Akman. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I like Jake Matthews. I like the progression we've seen from him. Obviously, I know that he lost his last fight to Anthony Rocco Martin, but Anthony Martin's a dangerous fighter himself, and that was a good fight as well. Went through 3 rounds, and obviously he was eventually caught with that anaconda choke in the third. But yeah, I like his progression. Obviously, we've seen him fill out as well. He's grown into that welterweight frame of his, and I think that's really helped him, and it's really helped with his power and his speed as well, because as we saw in the 3-fight win streak of his against Bojan Velikovic, Jingliang Li and Shinso Anzai, he's getting quicker, and he has got he does hit hard. He hits very hard, especially that right hand. I mean, that Li Jingliang win especially he was only last year. I mean, that's a very good victory, because he's a guy who can really mix it up with people, and I'm looking forward to seeing him back in action again. I'm looking forward to seeing again, he's only 25 years old, so I'm looking forward to seeing what changes he's made since he last fought, which was December of last year, and I'm looking forward to seeing if he has progressed. And something I like about Jack Matthews is he is willing to mix things up, and he is willing to throw in takedowns and mix that into his game plan, and he's a dangerous guy on the ground as well. He's got a few rear naked chokes as well. When he gets you in that position, that is something that he can put you away with, and he's got a number of rear naked choke finishes on his record. So for me, this is a fight that's going to be Jake Matthews to lose rather than Rostem Akman's to win. Akman, obviously, we saw in his debut against you know me and my pronunciation, Sergey Kandosko, back in June of this year. It was a bit of a back and forth fight. I mean, Akman didn't do too badly. They were trading nicely, but as the fight wore on, I'm going to call him Sergey. Sergey pressed the action a bit more and was just landing the heavier strikes, and eventually came out with the decision victory. But looking back through his record, he's got a lot of stoppages on his record, so he's a dangerous fighter. But for me, I think that Akman is going to be the man pushing the pace. We saw that in his last fight. He was more than happy to take the centre of the octagon. He was more than happy to push the pace and to fight at his tempo and his range. And my worry there is that Matthews has got a good counter right hand, and Akman was getting countered quite a lot in the previous fight, despite the fact he was pushing the pace. And I worry that the same thing is going to happen again in this fight. Now, one thing I've really liked about Akman in his UFC debut was how calm and how composed he was for a young guy. I mean, he's 27 years of age. He was making his UFC debut, and he was really calm. He was really composed. I think that goes down to his background. He's got an extensive amateur background in fighting in the IMAF European and World Championships, which I think we've spoke about before, is a fantastic platform for amateurs to really make that step up to the professional ranks, and that really showed in his debut. like I say, just how calm and composed he was, and he just looked natural in there. He looked as though he'd been fighting for years and years. He looked like he'd been a UFC athlete for years and years. He certainly didn't look like someone who was making their UFC debut. Now, one thing that you don't want is Rostem and Akman to get on top of you, because man, this guy's possibly the hairiest guy I've ever seen in my life. So not only do you want to be on the bottom for a danger perspective and for a losing the round perspective, you're also going to be covered in this guy's hair as well if you're on the bottom and he manages to get on top of you. But
Pound for pound, the hairiest man on the planet.
Oh God, 100%, man. I was looking again when I was watching some tape after this. He literally is the hairiest guy in the world.
Listen,
man.
It could be worse, right? Honestly, just digressing here, just a little bit, right? Imagine that the dude shaves his body like a week before the fight or a couple of days before the fight. Like, that would be horrendous. It would be like fucking Velcro. You know what I mean?
Raise the sharp chest there. That could be a secret weapon. Maybe you should drop him a message on social media and say, "Here you go, I've got something for you." You can definitely get some cuts on the opponent's eyebrows and things like that by just merely rubbing your chest against them.
I'll do that for a percent of his purse.
Definitely, but yeah, we digress slightly, but. He looks like as well, when I've seen him in fights, when he gets his opponent down, he can spend a bit of time in top control. We saw in his debut that he does predominantly like to strike, but yeah, he does look more than capable when I've seen him anywhere. But for me, I like Jake Matthews in this fight. I just think that he's a slight level above. As I mentioned in one of the earlier fight breakdowns, the Tuivasa fight breakdown as well, just the level of competition they've fought. I know that Akman's got that IMAF background, which obviously, like I say, is a really good platform. But when you look at his professional record, I mean, he's going up against guys who are his fight prior to his last fight before he got into the UFC, he was fighting a guy who was 9-10. The fight prior to that, his opponent was 11-13, 3-6, 1-0, 1-2. So he's only fought two guys in his professional career who have got a winning record, and Jake Matthews has gone up against, like I say, he's gone up against some beasts, Li Jingliang, especially Kevin Lee. Obviously, he lost that fight in the first round, but again, it's all experience. Anthony Rocco Martin, he's been there with some of the toughest guys in the weight class, and for me, I just think the fact that he's fought this level of competition, I just think he's going to be a slight level above Akman at the moment. Like I say, Akman was getting caught a few times with those counter strikes. Jake Matthews has got a very nice counter right hand, throws it quick, he throws it hard, and I actually think he's going to be able to drop Akman with that counter right at some point, and I think he's going to jump him on the ground, and I think he's going to try and work for another one of those signature rear naked chokes, and I do have Jake Matthews winning this fight via rear naked choke in the second round.
Yeah, I agree with what you were saying with Akman in regards to coming into the UFC debut. I was in attendance in Stockholm for that fight with Sergey, and like you've already said, he just looks, he looked like he'd been in there before. You know, there was no real UFC jitters, which you actually see quite a lot. But there was none of that from Akman. However, with that being said, I do think this fight's a mismatch. I'm really high on Jake Matthews, and you know, it's one of these stories for me that I absolutely love, because from a personal perspective, because there was a time where I didn't think Jake Matthews was that good, and I didn't think he would even be a fringe fighter. I just thought he would be a guy filling out the early prelims and probably end up on a .500 record. But I love it when I feel that way about a fighter, and then they improve, develop, and then change my mind. And there's a couple of fighters like that, like some that I'm quite embarrassed about, really. One of them, Israel Adesanya. You know, I didn't see this surge earlier in his career. You know, I was constantly doubting him, wanting to see a little bit more, and I couldn't really get behind him. Obviously, I am now. Another one's Nathaniel Wood. That's another fighter that I wasn't sure how successful he was going to be in the UFC, transitioning over from Cage Warriors. So he's changed my mind. I'm fully behind Nathaniel Wood now. And Jake Matthews is one of these types of guys, man. He's just developed. He's grown into his body. He's moved up a weight division, and he just looks he just looks like a really solid all-round fighter. And I know he got beat by Anthony Rocco Martin, and that's a good win by Rocco as well. But he was in that fight, and I like Rocco Martin. I think he's a good fighter. So anybody that's having competitive fights with him is a fighter that I'm really gonna like. And Matthews is just well-rounded. He's just good everywhere. He's got power in his hands. We saw him hurt Li Jingliang numerous times in their fight. He's got good wrestling. He's got good jiu-jitsu. He's got 7 submission wins. Half of his wins have come via submission. 50% of them. He would have had this another submission win against Li Jingliang if he wasn't a bit of a dirty bastard and gouged his eyes while he had the choking. No idea how he got away with that, but the dude's got good grappling, and I just feel that I just don't see where Akman is better than Matthews in this fight. I don't think he's a better striker. I don't think he's got a better gas tank. I don't think he's got better wrestling. I don't think he's got better jiu-jitsu. And this isn't me just shitting on Akman. I actually think that Akman's a good fighter. And, like we've already mentioned, you've just mentioned, we mentioned last time as well, the IMAF Worlds and European Championships. That was great for him. He built up a 13-2 record as an amateur, with most of those fights being with the IMAF tournaments. And as a 13-2 amateur, he then transitioned to be a professional. Obviously, he's 6-1 now, but all those 6 fights that he's fought as a pro, he's finished 5 by knockout, 1 by submission. Whereas in the amateurs and in the IMAF, the majority of the fights were coming by decision. So you can see how his game's improved. And like I say, I like the guy. I just think he needs time to develop, and I'm a little bit unsure why the UFC is sending him all the way over to Australia. I know it sounds bad to get beat by Jake Matthews, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. I would have liked to have seen the UFC giving Akman, another fighter like Sergey Kondosco that can be competitive and start to develop Akman, because I think the skills are there. He just needs a little bit of time, that's all. But like I say, as for this fight, I think Akman's just going to be beat everywhere by Matthews, unless he catches. He's got 5 wins by knockout, so the dude clearly hits hard, as he's been knocking many people out. So Matthews, he's got to be careful of that. He's got to understand that even though he is probably, more likely technically better everywhere, he does have to respect the power of Akman and respect the fact that he hits hard and that he's knocked 5 out of his 6 opponents out. So that's the path to victory for Akman, just to really just stay vertical, try and not get taken down, really start to look for your shots when the exchanges happen inside the pocket. Just try and find the openings, try and make your reads and try and land. But ultimately, I agree with you, John. Exactly how you said that you think this fight's going to finish. I agree with it 100%. I think Jake Matthews is going to land a shot in an exchange. He's going to find the chin, he's going to drop Akman, and he's going to jump on a submission. So I've got Jake Matthews to win. I'm going to take him to win via submission. And with the Newsome MMA main card complete, we'll now quick fire off the remaining Newsome MMA prelims. And first up is Jumeau versus Dhiego Lima. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is an interesting fight, and quite a difficult one to call in my opinion. Obviously, Lima was on that poor run after the Ultimate Fighter, but he's got back to winning ways. He wins over Chad LaPriest and Court McGee. That LaPriest win, obviously, quite the spectacular knockout shot in the first round. Jumeau, we don't really see enough of this guy to really get a good read on kind of where he is. Obviously, we saw in the Daichi Abe fight, in the last fight, he got caught a couple of times, especially in the first round, but he managed to come out of that with the win. Lost his fight prior to that. I'm going with this to go the distance. I don't think either guy's going to finish their opponent. I'm going with Dhiego Lima just to edge this. I think he's got slightly more experience. I think on the feet, we saw Jumeau hurt a couple of times against Abe, and I think that Lima will be able to land strikes, and that'll just edge it out for him. So I think it's going to be a close decision, but I'm going with Dhiego Lima to win this fight.
Yeah, I'm a little bit underwhelmed with Luke Jumeau as well. I do think he's got skills striking. I think he can be technical. I think he can be crisp. But I also think that um, where he's at from a quality perspective is a little low right now, and there is a lot of room for improvement and developments. But he's 31, so whether we see that or not, I'm not too sure. As for Dhiego Lima, I've always low key been a bit of a fan of Dhiego Lima. Obviously, love his brother as well. You know, we can't talk about Dhiego Lima without talking about Douglas. But yeah, I low key like Lima. I'm glad that he's on back to back wins now after taking 3 losses in a row, and especially in that last fight with Court McGee, he kept it really technical and he kept it safe, which is great for a fighter that for a fighter that is in a fight that's likely to go to a decision, because you are gonna look better in the judge's eyes. The Chad Laprise fight was really good as well from him. You know, he stayed out the way of Chad Laprise's technical boxing and countered him and knocked him clean out. So I favour Dhiego Lima in this fight. I also agree with you, John. I actually don't see a finish in this fight. I think if any finish happened, maybe the fight hits the mat and Dhiego Lima takes the back and submits Jumeau, but I think that's a low percentage outcome. I think Dhiego Lima is gonna just stay safe and just stay long and just land and out volume Luke Jumeau. So I'm going to take Dhiego Lima to win, and I'm going to take him to win via decision. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA Prelims, we've got, again, the home country fight, Callan versus Maki Pitolo. John, who have you got?
Yeah, Pitolo's one of the guys I'm actually looking forward to seeing on this fight card. I'm intrigued to see how he gets on. Obviously, making that step up from Contender Series. Callan Potter, I'll be honest, I'm not overly impressed with this guy. No offense to Callan Potter, but from what I've seen of him so far, I just don't think he's UFC quality. I mean, he lost his last fight. He got knocked out by Jalen Turner in 53 seconds. Turner, I'm quite big on, so that's, yes, you could kind of understand that. But he was only 2 fights prior to that he was losing to Marcin Held as well via heel hook in the first round. So he came into the UFC off the back of a 1-fight win streak. I know he'd won numerous fights before the Held fight, but yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, Potter prefers the fight on the ground or in the clinch. He's more of a submission guy. The majority of his wins come via submission, but I think he's going to get pieced up by Maki Pitolo. One thing I really liked about him that we saw in the Contender Series was how he mixes it up to the body, and how when he gets you up against the fence, he'll just hit you with 5 or 10 really light shots and then rip a couple of really hard shots to the body or a couple of hooks, and I really like how he mixes up the pace and speed and power that he puts into those strikes, rather than just trying to finish you with bombs all the time like we see so often. He's also from Hawaii, so you know he's going to be super tough. I've got Maki Pitolo winning this fight. I think he's going to knock out Callan Potter. I think he's going to knock him out in the first round.
Yeah, I like coconut bombs as well, man. He's a fun fighter to watch, and weirdly, you know, we were talking a minute ago about I was talking about why the UFC have made Akman fly over to Australia to potentially lose to Jake Matthews, or give Jake Matthews a win, whichever way around that you want to talk about. But I also feel the opposite way in this fight. I feel that they're bringing Callan Potter in front of his home crowd to take a loss, and I just don't see him beating Maki Pitolo. Maki Pitolo looks good everywhere. You know, his striking's explosive, rips to the body, rips to the head, mixes in kicks. But then, you know, you look further down his career, and the guy's got good wrestling, got good jiu-jitsu. He does give away positions a little bit too much in his jiu-jitsu. I've seen in previous fights. That may be an area where Callan Potter can expose him if he can get him down to the mat and make him make a mistake and maybe submit him. That's his path to victory. But I just feel that Potter's going to do exactly what he did against Turner. I think he's going to come out, he's going to shoot empty shots, instant desperation takedowns. It was quite weird to see that, to be honest. And I think Pitolo's just going to be able to deal with it and get him out of there. The one thing that I will say, though, that really, really struck a nerve with me with coconut bombs was his fight with Dakota Cochran. And if you go back and watch that fight, he was doing well in the fight. He took the first round. Didn't seem to be in any sort of danger. And then Dakota Cochran managed to get a takedown and wrapped up a guillotine. And he actually finished the fight 2 seconds before the round was due to be over. And it's not because he put Pitolo asleep. Pitolo tapped, and you physically heard the clapper for the 10-second clapper, and he waited, and he waited a few more seconds, and then he tapped to the guillotine. And he struck a nerve with me that I don't know how a fighter can hear that 10-second clapper, wait 8 seconds, and then tap. I just don't get it. I just didn't like to see. I don't like to see that at all. If you get put out and you go to sleep, go to sleep. But just the tapping with a choke, I'm not sure. If it was an arm or a leg and it's being hyperextended, I get there's a case for that. But a choke, nothing bad's going to happen if you get put to sleep for a second. So didn't really like that about Pitolo. But in this fight, Callan Potter, it's tough to go with the 35-year-old. He's been around for a long time, 17-8. He's older against a young, hungry, coconut bombing Hawaiian in Maki Pitolo. And I agree with you, John. I think he gets him out in round 1. So I'm going Maki Pitolo to win. I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And in the next fight, we've got Megan Anderson versus Zarah Fairn dos Santos. John, who have you got?
Yeah, going back to what you just said about people being bought into to lose, or people being bought into to win against people, I no offense to Dos Santos, but I think that she's fallen into the category of being bought into to lose against one of the hometown fighters. Now, Anderson, for me, he's one of these fighters that we can't really judge her level yet, because obviously we saw her against Holly Holm. She got pretty handedly beaten in that fight. Her only win in the UFC is against Kassem, which was that freak big toe slicing the eye up, which was really unfortunate. There wasn't really any skill involved in that. It was just a freak incident. And then obviously we saw her get beaten in the first round against Felicia Spencer, who Spencer's she looks a really good fighter, so she looks a decent level, but it doesn't really tell us a whole lot about Anderson. And she's actually fighting someone with quite a similar frame to her. I mean, she's 6 foot tall, but her opponent's not quite as tall. She's 5'10", but yeah, she's actually fighting someone who's at a similar level, height, and things that make him as a bit of a shock to her. She may not have fought anyone anywhere quite near as tall as her previously, so it'd be interesting to see how she fares against that. But Dos Santos, I mean, it's hard to tell on these regional scenes what their opponents are like. I mean, I watched her last fight against Isabella Badurek, and she landed some nice shots. She had a nice 1-2. She had a powerful right hand, but what's the level of competition? Who's she fighting? I mean, we've seen her fight on Bama before back in 2016. She lost to Sinead Kavanagh, who some European MMA fans will probably have heard of, but yeah, it's really hard to judge Dos Santos' level at the moment and where she is, and I feel that this is one of those fights where she's predominantly a striker from what I've seen, so I think they want to put Anderson up against another striker and hope that she can show off her striking prowess. And for me, I think it's going to be like I say, a stand-up battle. I don't think either of them are going to put each other away. Actually, I think it's going to go the distance, or Megan Anderson is going to get a late finish. But I'm edging more towards the fact that this fight is going to go the distance, and as the only 2 losses of Dos Santos' career have come via decision, I think Megan Anderson is going to slightly edge the striking battle and get the win in this one. But yeah, as you said for a couple of the other fights, I think it's they've brought Dos Santos in possibly to give Anderson another way back into that win column.
Yeah, I agree with that statement as well, and it really pisses me off actually saying stuff like that, because it makes it sound like I'm being really disrespectful to fighters, and I'm not.
Yeah.
But like this is the reality of it, and actually the UFC can't be blamed for this either, because when you actually break this down, I know I'm digressing a little bit here, but when you actually break this down, it's actually one part of the job of the matchmakers in combat sports to build up prospects. And the UFC obviously see something in Megan Anderson. They nearly gave a debut to Cyborg, who was the current champion, wiping through everybody at the time. So the UFC clearly see something in Megan Anderson. You can see why the UFC like her. And that's one part of the job of a matchmaker, to build the prospects up who they believe are the prospects, and to give them favourable fights to get experience under the belt and build the name. And that's exactly what they're doing here, and what they're doing for a few other fighters at the minute as well. And from what I've seen of Dos Santos, I don't think she looks like a striker, predominantly a striker again from what I've seen, and I just don't think she matches up very well with Megan Anderson at all. I'm not sure the quality is there from Dos Santos. I've been wrong about this before. The name that I'll always bring up in this scenario is the Laureano Starapoli fight against Hector Aldana. The fact that he looked so bad on tape, and then he came in and his striking was just on a level that I don't think anybody really anticipated. So there is always that chance that Dos Santos has that effect, the fact that his striking looks a little bit subpar in tape, and then she comes up and really steps up to this level and looks really great. But I don't see it. I think the fight's been set up for Megan Anderson to win, and I actually don't think this fight goes the distance. I think Megan Anderson's going to come into this fight knowing that she's got a stand-up fight, knowing that she's not going to get taken down like she was against Spencer. Holly Holm obviously surprised, but after round one she expected she was going to be taken down, and I think she can come out and just be really aggressive in this fight without too much of a worry of being put on her back, because I think Dos Santos is going to stand with her and probably not look for takedowns, and if she does, they might be desperation takedowns which Anderson may be able to stuff. So I just feel that the fight, this fight is really, really nicely set up for Megan Anderson to come out into a home country, look fantastic, get a name back in the win column, get the people talking about her in the UFC, and starting to build from there. So I'm going to take Megan Anderson to win this fight, and I'm going to take her to win by knockout. And in the next fight, we've got two newcomers, a fight that I'm actually really excited to see, to be honest. We've got Jamie Mullarkey versus Brad Riddell. John, who have you got?
Yeah, as you said, I'm actually really looking forward to this fight. I think it could be really fun. I think it's going to be an entertaining battle. Both guys like to come out and throw hands from what I've seen. Both guys are aggressive. Mullarkey has got some nice wins. He's got some good ground and pound, as we saw in the Josh Togo fight, and then he can carry his power into the later rounds as well. We've seen him finish fights going into the second round and third round as well, if you go back a few years, and I think this is going to be a fight where neither guy wants to back down. I mean, Brad Riddell, I do like the looks of him. I was looking at his watching his last few fights, and he's a really aggressive guy, but a guy who does mix it up, and he does mix up his strikes while he throws kicks and lands knees and mixes them into his combinations really nicely. So he's always getting his opponent to keep thinking, and he has fought UFC level competition before in Kenan Song. Back in 2017, he got the win as well. There, he actually finished him with strikes, so it kind of gives you some sort of indication as to his level. Again, he's another guy from City Kickboxing as well, so you know that he's going to have that good level of striking, and I think that is what he's going to help Brad Riddell on the way to victory in this fight. I think that his ability to mix it up. I do like the look of his striking, and like I say, he looks like he throws such heavy kicks and heavy knees. I mean, they helped in some of his victories in his previous couple of bouts. Just those knees setting up finishes, and those kicks causing serious damage to his opponents, and always making his opponents think about what's coming next. And I think that is going to help Brad Riddell to get the victory. I think he's going to finish Jamie Mullarkey. I think it's going to be late on. I think it's going to be in the third round. I think they're going to battle it out for a couple of rounds, and I actually think this is going to be one of the most entertaining fights on the card. But yeah, I'm going with Brad Riddell to win this fight. I think he's going to win via stoppage in the third round.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you were saying about potentially one of the most fun fights on the card. I didn't really know much about these guys. I knew more about one than the other, but Jamie Mullarkey, I knew really nothing about. And actually, when I started watching tape on him, I like the guy. He's got fluid movement. He's got a good all round game. His takedowns are mixed into to his style as well, and he's got decent control on the mat also. And then from the other side of the coin, you've got Brad Riddell now. For anybody that doesn't know who Brad Riddell is, Brad Riddell's actually the third man on this card out that fights out of City Kickboxing. Um, Seems to be really good friends with Israel Adesanya. He's definitely Adesanya's definitely vouched for the skills of Brad Riddell, and Brad Riddell's the striking coach of Alexander Volkanovski as well, also in his corners during his fights. So the dude is very respected. And like I say, when you're coaching a guy like Alexander Volkanovski, when you're his striking coach and you're about to be coaching him for a world title fight, you're going to be good yourself. But this is not one of these cases um, where the coach is coming in and is he old and is he just in there just because he's got good people surrounding him and he's fighting close to home. Brad Riddell's only 29 years old, so he's still relatively young. He's got the kickboxing background as well, and like you've already mentioned, John, he's got good low kicks. He mixes in punches to the body and head, and from Jamie Mullarkey's point of view, like I say, he's got a good all round game as well. I think it's going to be really fun, but the fight isn't going to take place for 15 minutes at range. I think the range is going to be closed constantly by Brad Riddell, and Brad Riddell's also the slightly bigger fighter in there, so he's a fighter. This fight's at lightweight, 155 pounds. Riddell's sort of fought at welterweight before as well as lightweight, whereas Jamie Mullarkey's on the other end of it, so he's fought at lightweight, but he's also fought at featherweight. Riddell's going to be the slightly bigger guy in there. I'm not sure whether the speed is going to be on his side or not, but definitely the power is. I think the accuracy and the combat sports experience is going to really play a factor in this fight. And again, I agree with you, John. I don't think it's going to go the distance, so I'm going to pick Brad Riddell to win, and I'm going to take him to win by a knockout. And in the next fight on the Newsome MMA Prelims, we've got Nadia Kassem versus Yeon Kim. John, who have you got?
Yeah, this is a fight where I'm actually going to go with the underdog in this one. I'm going to go with Nadia Kassem. Obviously, we've seen her go 1-1 in the UFC so far. The main problem that she has is those takedowns, that takedown defense. But for me, that's because she's so aggressive and she just marches forward. She throws so many strikes. She throws a lot of kicks as well, which leaves herself vulnerable. Against Alex Chambers, she was able to get back to her feet despite being taken down 3 or 4 times. But against a girl who's as good on the ground as Montana De La Rosa, obviously you're going to become unstuck now. Yeon Kim, so far from her, we haven't really seen her utilise any kind of wrestling game. She tends to want to stand and strike as well, and it's that reason that I think Kassem's going to win, because if they do stand and trade, I think that Kassem's output will be the difference and will enable her to get the judges the nod in the judges' eyes. But Yeon Kim would certainly put her in good stead to shoot some takedowns in this fight, and I definitely think she should mix that into a game plan, because that's the weakness we've seen from Nadia Kassem so far, and that is how you can win fights against her, by taking her down and keeping her on the mat. And if Kim does that, if she does involve the takedowns in a game plan, then this fight can definitely flip, and I'll be picking Kim to win. But just on the onset, I think they're going to want to stand and trade. I think Kim's going to try and trade with Kassem, and I just think her output will be too much, and for that reason, I think Nadia Kassem's going to win a decision.
Yeah, I'm going the other way. I'm going to pick Yeon Kim to win, and I think she's going to win by decision. And I just feel that I've been really underwhelmed with Nadia Kassem, and I do agree with the stuff that you've been saying, John. She leaves herself open and she's vulnerable to being taken down, and that's not necessarily Kim's game. She may adopt something like that if she feels that there's a real weakness there of Kassem. But with you saying that Kassem's aggressive, I also agree with that. And because she's aggressive, not only does it leave her vulnerable to takedowns, again, like you've already mentioned, but I do feel it leaves her vulnerable to be hit as well, to be countered. I think it leaves her open, and I just think that in women's MMA, when you're a fighter like Ji-Yeon Kim, who's just got the fundamentals down, and you can just land and you can point. A lot of women's fights do go to a decision. I just feel that she's got one of those styles where she can just out volume a fighter at this level, and I think Kassem is at that level where Ji-Yeon Kim can go into the cage and look decent against her, and like I say, put up a decent performance in front of the judges. So for that reason, I just feel that if the fight hits the scorecards and goes to a judge's decision, I just feel that Kim will have landed a little bit more and done a little bit more over the 15 minutes. So I'm taking Ji-Yeon Kim to win. I'm going to take her to win by decision. And in the final fight of the card, the final breakdown of the podcast, we've got Khalid Taha versus Bruno Silva. John, who have you got?
Yeah, I like Khalid Taha. I mean, I was really impressed with his last fight against Boston Salmon. He won, obviously, against a guy who had got very good boxing credentials, and he outboxed him and landed a massive, heavy couple of strikes and put him out 25 seconds into the first round. And there's a lot of hype behind Boston Salmon, and he got finished early on by this guy. And even in his loss against Nadia, he looked okay. I mean, he was pretty undersized in that fight against Narimani, and he held a good account for himself. Obviously, he didn't get the win. He went to a decision and he lost the decision, but he put up a decent fight and he had a good account of himself. Now, Bruno Silva I haven't seen a great deal of, but this guy's a guy who's fought all over the place, fought all over the world, fought on some good promotions. We've seen him previously in the Ultimate Fighter Brazil. We've seen him fight on the regional Brazilian scene. We've seen him fight guys like Casey Kenny, who we know is a decent level in LFA. He's got a number of first round stoppage wins, so we know that he's dangerous. You know that he possesses power with those strikes. I mean, he broke his opponent's jaw in the opening fight of the Ultimate Fighter, which obviously you've got to have some power to be able to do that. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, Taha does have quite a significant height advantage. I mean, his opponent, I think he's record shows he's 5'3", which for a bantamweight is pretty small. That's the John Lineker kind of height range. So Taha will be well suited to keep this fight at a bit of distance and utilise that striking that we saw in the Boston Salmon fight. But ultimately, I think from what I've seen, I think Khalid Taha, he's going to come out of this fight victorious. I think he's going to be able to have the more success in the striking, and that is going to be able to help him en route to a victory. And I think he's going to win this fight. I think it might go if he goes out of the first round, I think it might go to a decision. A lot of the majority of the defeats on Bruno Silva's record come in the first round. If he gets out of the first round, maybe it's because his opponent's tired slightly, or maybe he just works himself into the fight. But yeah, it tends to be able to withstand things then. But so for that reason, if he gets out of the first round, I'm going with Taha to win via decision, and that's going to be my pick.
Yeah, this fight has left me all kinds of puzzled because it's supposed to have happened at UFC 242 in Abu Dhabi. Now, from what I gather, that fight card, I think they ended up having like 14 fights on the card, and obviously this Australian card 243 was, wasn't as full. So I just don't understand why they picked that fight, why they're sending a German and a Brazilian over to Australia to fight, especially with the Brazilian card coming up soon as well. But, it's besides the point. To this fight, I think Khalid Taha is going to be too much for him. I was really surprised when he knocked out Boston Salmon. I thought in any area of that fight where Taha loses, it's in the striking, just because of Boston Salmon's background, and he managed to just fold him up like a deck chair. So it was a good performance and a good win from Taha. But I think the key thing here, and you touched upon it as well, John, is the size. We've got a guy that used to fight at flyweight in Bruno Silva coming up to fight at bantamweight. I do think he's very, very undersized at bantamweight. Whereas you've got someone like Khalid Taha, who is physically huge. even when he fought at featherweight on his debut against Narimani, he didn't look massively undersized as a featherweight. So his obviously natural weight is bantamweight. He's coming back down to that. So I think that it's going to be a little similar, not exactly the same, but a little bit similar to the Brad Riddell and Jamie Mullarkey fight in regards to one guy being taller and physically thicker, physically bigger as well, against a guy that's smaller and not as big. And I think that's really going to play a part in this fight, because I think if Bruno Silva wins this fight, he needs to get a hold of Taha. He needs to take him down. He needs to work him on the mat, opposed to staying on the feet. And I think Narimani had, he got him down a couple of times, but Taha wasn't easy to take down. And again, going back to the Boston Salmon fight, that's why I sort of favoured Boston Salmon quite a lot, because I knew that he didn't need I didn't think that he needed the takedowns to win the fight. I thought he could win it on the feet quite comfortably. Obviously, he got flatlined. So I feel that Bruno Silva's going to have a very hard time trying to take Taha down, which I think is where he needs to fight. Whilst this fight is standing, I think that Taha can land hard shots. I think he can knock him out. And I also think that if Taha just wanted a little bit of a breather or a break, or just wanted to waste some time on the clock and guarantee himself a win, he can just tie up with Bruno Silva, push his back to the cage and just work on him in a dirty boxing style in the clinch, doing just enough for the referee not to split you up, that type of performance, and just hold him there, because I just feel that, like I say, the size and the strength and the physical advantages are going to play a big part in this fight. I do think the fight in open space is going to be quite explosive from Taha's point of view, so for that reason I am going to take Taha to win, and I'm going to take him to win via knockout. And that's it for this week's podcast, guys. So John, before we hit the Newsome MMA mentions, what do you need to mention, man?
Yeah, just as always, make sure you hit me up on Twitter at MMA. I'm always down to talk anything MMA related, and I always like to hear different people's opinions, points of view, thoughts on cards, thoughts on everything that happens. So yeah, hit me up at MMA, and yeah, we'll get talking about all things MMA.
Awesome. Now for the Newsome MMA mentions. First of all, I want to mention the Newsome MMA website. Don't forget to visit the outlet's website at newsomemma.co.uk, where you'll find the locally famous tape index feature, prediction videos, fighter interviews, and content collaboration from Heavy Duty Fight Management too. You can even request colour commentary and media coverage from Newsome MMA as well. Next up is MMA Play 365, which I spoke about at the start of the podcast. MMA Play 365 is the perfect betting advice platform for any type of gambler, whether you're in this game for the long term or whether you just want some fun bets whilst watching the fights on the night. The goal is to make money, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing for you. So follow MMA Play 365 over on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, or visit MMAplay365.com to subscribe today. The next mention is a long-term sponsor of Newsome MMA, CBD Life UK. CBD is an amazing product and something that I use myself. Thousands of professional athletes also use CBD too, and at CBD Life UK they've got a wide variety of products to suit the needs of any customer. You can go to cbdlifeuk.com and use promo code Newsome MMA to also get 15% off your order. And the final mention is for the newest sponsors of Newsome MMA, Golden Ticket Fight Promotions. Golden Ticket put on some fantastic MMA shows and are one of the biggest regional promotions in the Midlands over here in the UK. Their last event was GTFP 12 last weekend, which was a blockbuster show, so make sure you keep an eye out for the next scheduled event. You can also follow them on all their social channels, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, to keep up to date with everything Golden Ticket. And that's it from us, guys. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night, and we'll see you again for UFC 244.
Thanks guys, enjoy.